to my mate. But it wasn't until later on in life. So I know for a fact that there are many sisters out there, women, that never reach an orgasm.
And the thing is, you don't know that you've never had an orgasm until you have one. Because,
yeah,
like you mentioned, I'm
telling you.
Myself, I had never had an orgasm having intercourse. They have little things and everything. So,
what's those little things and everything?
the first orgasm I had, it shocked me because I was like, what is this?
Right.
I said, what is this? And it felt good, and my vaginal muscles were twitching like this.
Mm-hmm.
It had never done that before,
right.
Ever. And I called myself done had some bomb sex. I said, oh, I done had me some good sex.
And after that, you needed to have it every time. It was no stopping. I have to get to that point.
I mean, I just can't imagine. Like, I know, but what I'm saying is, I've experienced that even before I had sex. So for somebody to have sex for years and not experience that is like.
Well, even having sex, I've never had an orgasm with a sexual encounter. With intercourse. I've never had an orgasm that way.
I know where the spot is now, but
I know where my spot is now.
But you have to transfer that for your mate. You have to
get one.
Show him.
Get
But you have to communicate with him to show him where that spot actually is. And sometimes he has to just let you take control and get you there. Get yourself there. And it has worked.
Yeah, you're right.
Something you said earlier was about attention, and I was just, because we talking about physical foreplay, but for me, mental foreplay is important too, because let's say you have a mate and you wake up in the morning, maybe one mate wakes up before the other one, and they get up and they leave the house, and then the other mate wakes up. So you haven't really had any contact. Both of you are at work, and maybe throughout the day you may have had a phone call, did you do this, did you do that? Then you come home and you do whatever chores it is you're doing, right? And let's say you end up in the bed. And then he just wants to have sex. And it's like, boo, we haven't had any type of connection today, and when I'm trying to explain that, it's like I'm speaking a foreign language. Men don't understand that. It's like, connect with me before you just,
attack
and it could be something simple, the connection. And I know you're saying you don't have that problem, right?
Well, I'm going to tell you this here about me. I'm different. I can be mad, pissed off, we just got into an argument. But when I get in the bed, I'm not mad, I want a little sex. But then when I get out of the bed, I'm like, oh, I'm just pissed.
So when you get in the bed, you just gonna jump on it?
Yeah. Yeah.
I understand what you're saying.
I understand what she's saying.
I
understand what she's saying too, but I'm not saying that. I know what you're saying. You're saying like sometimes send me a text message throughout the day saying, hey baby, how was your day? Can't wait to see you when I get home and all that. I know exactly what you're talking about. I know exactly what you're talking about. And I'm not saying that, but the majority of the time, I'm different. I'm a little bit different. I can just go ahead and just.
Well, I think that too, if you're in a situation where you have a mate and you don't live in the same household, that's totally different than when you're in the same household. Because if I have a mate, we don't live in the same household, it's like an association thing. I know that when I see them, it's going to jump off. But when we live in the same household, it's not going to jump off every time we get home or, a couple times, so it's kind of different. But you put yourself in that mind frame when you don't live with your mate that when y'all get together, it's going to already be like that.
But how do you live in the same household and not communicate with each other? Not have a conversation? How can that happen?
Ooh. It's easier to happen.
Yeah, you have children, you have bills, you have other interests, you're tired, you're working. It's
and
easy,
the smallest
to get
tension,
off. Of
can
course.
grow into a big tension.
So you can,
And you can get
telling
stuck in
them
that rut.
something.
Right.
so you saying that you can live in the same house, live in the same bed, you know, days on end and not communicate with each other?
Not have the time to connect. Not be in sync with each other at the same time, where you kind of have to say, okay, I'm going to focus on my mate. I'm going to focus on pleasing my mate. This is the time I have to cut everything off, like how you turn on and turn off. You have to turn off all that other drama that's going on outside of the house. I mean, outside of the bedroom. The children, the bills, TV, you know, food, eating, whatever, and then focus on now my mate, pleasing my mate. Sometimes you forget to turn on and turn off. And they all kind of just go intertwine with each other. And you forget. Because you live together every day. And sometimes it doesn't happen the way you would like it to be.
And sometimes
And
the person, you get on each other's nerves.
Yeah. Because the peeing on the toilet, because of not washing the dishes, you didn't take the trash out. I mean, it could be a whole bunch of things that just escalated, just piles of, I'm not turning on
Because he
anything.
want to spend some time with his boys. He's tired of being at home. Or it's like,
Yeah.
we could make a list off this whole table of the little tensions that come up when, you know, you live in the same household. Which is why I prefer to have separate households. But yes, it's the dynamic of it. Because it's like, if you go to work, you come home, let's say something happened to you at work, right? And then your mate is excited and you come home in a bad mood and they like, guess what happened to me? And you like, what? You know, they like, why you acting like that? You know, they excited. And then they have an attitude, right? Then you get an attitude because they got an attitude. And then you ain't speaking, they ain't speaking. That could go on for days.
I know, but was that the correct response?
No, but
it's
you don't always think about the correct
Right.
response when you've been with somebody for 3 years. It's like, you know what I'm saying? And even if you might be thinking of the correct response, that means your mate have to think of the correct response all the time too. And that's, like she said, you may not always be in sync like that. If your mate is mad and upset, that's what they're focusing on. They're not focusing on, okay, let me give her the correct response. And then your feelings get hurt. Even though you know, later on you may figure out, oh, he just had a bad day at work, you know. But he didn't probably tell you that coming through the door.
Communication.
It's paramount, but it ain't always there. Especially, you may be a good communicator, but what if your mate is not a good communicator?
I think that there are different ways of communication that will get a response from someone. You know, say for instance, some people aren't verbal, so you can write a letter. You know, so some men you can't talk to them, you know, sit and have a conversation, what they would read that letter that you write to them. You know, there are different ways and different forms of communication.
That's on like a case scenario, but on an everyday basis, you gonna sit down and write a note every day? You tired, you just got off work, it's 10 o'clock, you gonna sit down and write your mate a letter?
I probably would. You know, it's all
And then
about
when
what
they
you
read
want.
it, they gonna be like, and I'm not trying to be negative, I'm just letting you, I'm just letting you what happens. Like, this is why the divorce rate in America is
So that's what I'm
50%.
saying. That's what I'm saying. You see, everything you have to put forth that effort. You know, you want, you know, if something's not going right, then you need to have that communications there. If there are different ways, different forms of communication. If you can't sit and have that conversation with him, if you can't write that letter, then there are other ways that you have to find to communicate.
But your
But in
mate has to
reality,
be willing to communicate. And what you have to realize is that in our society, there is no emphasis on communication. We don't grow up and communication is something we taught in school. We don't grow up and our parents say, this is how you communicate.
Yes,
So,
I agree.
depending on how you grew up, where you grew up, you end up, you bring all this background into the relationship and your mate brings all this background. And they say, look, I don't feel like talking. I don't want to write no letters. I don't communicate. It ain't no problem. Just you tripping.
But you know what? most men don't communicate because they don't know how.
That's what I'm saying to you.
That's what I'm saying, and that's what you got to do if you want that relationship
Teach
to
a
work.
grown man how to communicate.
But
Yeah.
in reality,
Yeah.
even in your past, you've been with only guys that you've only been able to make them communicate when they didn't know how to. You mean to tell me that there has not been one guy that you've ever dealt with that you just said, this is just too much. I cannot communicate with you.
Yeah. That's over with and done with.
But I agree, the communication is the answer.
key, but it's a
It
big
But you
goes
know what?
all the
I
time.
understand that, but the over and done with relationship, okay, now I'm over and done with, now you want to learn, you want to start learning how to communicate. Okay, I'm glad you learned that, use that for your next relationship.